today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
the importance of setting boundaries in toxic relationships. Our job when setting boundaries is not to change their behavior because we can't. But if it's your partner, it's about what action you can take so that you feel safer. These are actions that you take for yourself, not an attempt to control the other person. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're covering setting boundaries in toxic relationships. And this is building on the last episode, which was all about identifying toxic behavior and whether you need to step out of the relationship or whether you can decrease the toxicity that's occurring in the relationship. And one of the first steps in order to gauge this was to set some boundaries. And so today, let's talk about setting boundaries, particularly in relationship to gaslighting, emotional manipulation, passive aggressiveness, stonewalling, excessive criticism, emotional withdrawal, controlling behavior, blaming, and deflecting. So we're going to cover boundaries for each of these areas. This is going to be a high level, very intense, information-rich podcast today. So let's get clear. What is an emotional boundary and how do you set one? The purpose of boundaries are so that we feel safe. It is normal and natural for us as human beings to mistake the purpose of boundaries in our relationship with our partner as being getting them to change their behavior. And the reason for this is, as children, our parents set boundaries with us all the time like this. They would say things like, I'll give you an older kid boundary. Your curfew is 10 o'clock. If you come home at 10 o'clock, there are going to be consequences. And when we would come in at 10:15 or 10:30, if they were effective parents, there would be consequences. And the purpose was to what? Change our behavior, to change our behavior from staying out too late at an age when maybe we shouldn't have, to change our behavior about rebelling against the boundary that our parents set for us, etc. So what we associate with setting boundaries is our experience as children very often. But in a partnership, and particularly when dealing with adults, we have a very different role. And so our role in a partnership is that we are equals. Our role in a partnership is to assume that the other person cares and is invested in our well-being. And our job when setting boundaries is not to change their behavior because we can't, right? They're not our kids, they're our partners. We don't have that kind of relationship with them. If we do, there's something wrong in the relationship. By the way, if you have a parental relationship with your partner, that's something that needs to be shifted and altered because in the long run, it's not sustainable. So the kinds of boundaries that we set with our partners are there for us to deflect or protect ourselves from behaviors and or expressions of emotion that are toxic for us and feel unsafe for us. And so today we're going to talk about boundaries in that context. How do you set a boundary? How do you set any kind of boundary? First, you identify what's the behavior that's harmful and decide what action can you take. Now, if it's your children, the action you can take is help them change the behavior because that's your mandate with them. That's your job. But if it's your partner, it's about what action you can take so that you feel safer. These are actions that you take for yourself, not an attempt to control the other person or change them. It might be an attempt to influence them. We always have influence over others. And we need to think very carefully about what influence works and what influence doesn't. So let me give you an example. If someone's very critical with you and you've decided that that criticism is negative and you feel like you're under attack, something you could do is walk away. All right. I've been studying karate for almost 40 years now. And one of the first lessons was, if you don't want to lose a fight, just don't be there for the fight. It isn't learn how to protect yourself, learn how to fight so that you can win. It was more, if you don't want to have the conflict, just don't be there when the punch is thrown. Don't be there. It's a very basic lesson. And from a fighting point of view, that might mean the punch is coming and you move so that it goes past you. That's exactly what we're advocating here. If criticism continues and it feels toxic and it feels hurtful, you're going to move so that you don't have to receive that. Coming up with a strategy for safety is the first step. Once you've identified what the thing is that is leading to you feeling unsafe. The next part is maybe, if it's constructive, to express the boundary. How do we know when it's constructive? It's constructive when we can, when it reinforces for us what the boundary is and is empowering for us to express it. And also B, when the person on the other side can receive it as something that we're doing for ourselves. So there's a tendency to express a boundary like this. You know, if you keep criticizing me, you're going to make me walk away every time that you get critical. So I'm just letting you know that's what's going to happen. They might experience that as a criticism and as blame. And so it's really important that we use I statements. I feel like I feel scared and hurt and a little frustrated when you speak to me with that particular tone. And so when this happens, I will probably take a time out and come back to this conversation at a later time. That would be using an I statement in a responsible way to let the other person know that you're setting the boundary. And the strength of doing that is it alerts them as to what's the dynamic you are experiencing. Notice that I talked about my emotions and I talked about their tone, not that they were being critical. I talked about the tone, how it was coming across. There's something about that feels like this to me, and what I'm going to do, and that it might even be fair to say, you know what, it may be that you don't mean anything by it, but the experience I'm having isn't healthy for me, and so I'm going to take time out to reset. Right, that would be a way of expressing it. And of course, then there's the last part. You know, just like when the kid comes home at 10:15 or 10:30, there needs to be some enforcement. And basically what that means is when that tone comes up, you say, hey, I'm feeling hurt, sad, angry. I'm going to take that time out that we talked about. Or if you didn't tell them, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable right now. Can we come back to this? All right, so now we understand what kinds of boundaries we're setting with our partners and how to do it. Let's talk about the toxic behaviors. Gaslighting, we're all familiar with. Gaslighting feels manipulative. It drives us to doubt our reality. It leaves us confused and questioning our own experiences. If you're not sure what gaslighting is, feel free to go to the previous podcast. I'm doing my best to keep this in that 20 to 30 minute treadmill time that we all like. And if I go into explaining everything in depth, as I did in the last podcast, we're going to be here for an hour. So forgive me if I don't give the level of detail on the toxicity that you need in this moment. So that's the behavior. The boundary is when I feel like my reality is being questioned, I'm going to disengage from the conversation. That's actually, I'm not sure that's clean. You know, that's an example that somebody gave me. A better way to put it might be when I give you my point of view and your point of view and my point of view are not in alignment, I'm going to step out and reset because I find that a little triggering. Though the first one might be okay too, when I feel like my reality is being questioned. Of course, what they're going to say is, what do you mean your reality is being questioned? And the important thing then is to leave. Another way to express it would be, I feel confused when you deny my experiences, or I feel confused when it feels like you're denying my experiences. If this continues, I need to pause our conversation and revisit it later. And of course, leaving is what you need to do. Let's talk about emotional manipulation. Very often, by the way, enforcing it is going to be removing yourself in some way, but not always. Emotional manipulation uses guilt, fear, or pity to influence your decisions. A decision you might make to yourself is, I will not make decisions based on guilt or fear. When I feel like guilt or fear are being raised, triggered in me, I'm going to take time to reflect before responding to that what feels like manipulation. When we say it to our partner, it's going to be something more like, I feel sometimes when we're talking, my guilt is being turned against me. I feel pressured. I'm going to take some time before making any decision in these circumstances. So that's not a walk away, but it is a put it on the shelf. And enforcing it is the next time that you're guilt or shamed by your partner, saying, hey, I can't talk about this right now. This is the context for this conversation really isn't working for me. Let's reschedule for tomorrow. All right, passive aggressiveness. This is one of the most challenging behaviors because very often the other person is in denial that they're engaging in it. Passive aggressiveness is an indirect expression of negative emotions that avoid open communication. A boundary we want to set between our own ears internally is when I notice that it's passive aggressive, or it feels passive aggressive, or I perceive or judge that this behavior is passive aggressive, I'm going to pause until we can address the source of the passive aggressiveness directly. This is really tricky. When we're expressing it, we're going to say, I feel frustrated when it seems like negative emotions are not being openly expressed. Now, there's two courses of actions we might take here. We might say, what is it that you're feeling mad, sad, glad, or mad or sad about that we could talk about, if anything? And that might be an opening for them. And it's really important that question be an open-ended question, like what, not why. Why are you doing this? Are you angry? That's a little more pokey, directive, blamey. But what have you, or even another way to do it might be, is there something that I've done? What have I done that has maybe brought up some sadness, hurt, fear, or anger for you? And plan B would be, I feel frustrated when it seems like negative emotions are being indirectly expressed, and I'm going to just step away until we can talk more directly. Forcing it, again, is going to be disengaging from the conversation when that behavior cannot be aired out, when that passive aggressiveness can't be aired out and expressed. The idea here is we want to encourage our partners to express their emotions more directly. By the way, the next episode of the Rich and Relationship podcast is going to be all about expressing emotions, particularly negative emotions, in ways that are safe and healing. All right, stonewalling. Stonewalling is when the other person the other person just shuts down. They just stop talking. They stop communicating. Very often, the reason why I've been saying, I need to step away, can we talk about this tomorrow, is the cure for stonewalling, if someone's accusing you of stonewalling when you're enforcing a boundary, is to say, I can't talk about this right now, and I'd really like to in an hour, in a day, in a week. It's no longer, if you're leaving an opening to have a conversation in the future, it's not stonewalling. If you're just walking away without saying anything, it's stonewalling. So the boundary we set for ourselves between our own ears is, if they refuse to communicate, I'm going to walk away also and give us both time to cool down. And I want you to get that very often the stonewaller is experiencing fight, flight, or play dead, and stonewalling is actually play dead for them. And so giving yourselves both time to cool off is probably the most direct cure for this. Anytime stonewalling occurs, it's not worth it to call it out. It's more, except in this way. We might enforce it by saying, I can see that this conversation's become very one-sided, that you're done with it for now. I'm going to take a time out, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about this in an hour, a day, whatever. You want to make sure that when you're honoring their experience by walking away, that you let them know that you'd like to hear what's going on for them. It might even be better to say, hey, I can see that right now you're not wanting to participate in this conversation, and I really want to know what you're feeling and what's going on with you. I'll bring this up with you in a couple hours and let's look at it then. That would be a gentler way to enforce it. Excessive criticism is clearly when no matter what you do, the feedback seems to undermine your confidence and self-esteem. The boundary we want to set in our own ears, in our own head, between our own ears, losing the ability to talk, is when I feel excessively criticized, I will remove myself from the conversation. So why would we remove ourselves instead of saying, hey, you're being really critical? Well, we will say that, but the truth is when someone's on a roll, they're usually, excessive criticism is usually the fight part of fight, flight, or play dead. They're usually triggered. The reason why walk away is so often the best solution is it takes time for the brain and the chemistry to reset when someone's triggered. So what we would say is, I feel hurt right now. When you say that I'm bad at cleaning up the kitchen because when I was a kid, my mom used to criticize me all the time for not cleaning up well or thoroughly. Again, it's the use of an I statement. I feel hurt when you say this because it brings up this in me from my past. And you want them to understand why you're feeling triggered and let them know I'm going to take a break. But again, taking a break means we're going to return to it. And of course, the enforcement is when you feel that criticism is harmful or toxic, don't re-engage. And you say that, you express it, don't re-engage until your partner is in a space where they can be respectful. So if you sense that they've got kind of an aggressive energy on or a self-righteousness, that there's probably not going to be a lot of space. Emotional withdrawal. This is when the person intentionally creates emotional. Actually, I would say that it's not just intentionally, it might be unconsciously. They either intentionally or unconsciously create emotional distance as a form of punishment or to avoid intimacy. If you listen to our earlier podcast on the 12 stages of overwhelm in relationship, you'll know that this is a sign of relational overwhelm, that when people do this, it can be an indicator that they're just so triggered and it's been going on for so long, they just don't know any other way to handle it. It can be vindictive and even passive aggressive. But just get that it's not just that they're anuses, it's that something's going on with them. So the boundary we want to set for ourselves is that when they withdraw emotionally, the decision we're going to make is when they withdraw emotionally, we're going to give them respect. We're going to respect their need for space. But at the same time, we're going to honor our own need for emotional connection. And for some people, unconsciously, we start looking for emotional connection with other people in a way that's not appropriate given our marital commitment, whatever that looks like for you. That's not what honoring our need for emotional connection is about. It's really about expressing this in a way where they can really hear that we have a need for emotional connection. So expressing it would look like this. I understand that you need space. And my need for connection to you, you're someone I love, you're someone I care about, my need for connection is not being met at this time. Maybe we could find a way to bridge this, or if we can't, maybe we need to get some outside help. Or maybe if you won't go with me to therapy or to couples counseling or to Rich in Relationship, got to pitch for myself a little there, then I'll go. I'll go because I hear they really know a lot and that they can help me to alter what's going on with me so that it helps both of us. Of course, enforcing it is if the emotional distance continues for too long, you need to make a decision about how long you're going to tolerate that. If it goes on, if it goes on for a week and you've decided a week is your limit, you need to say to them, I gave this in my mind a week, and it's been a week of very emotionally distant. I just feel like we're totally disconnected from each other. Are you ready to get some help? You're not. we can't go together, then I'm going to go on my own. All right. It can't be, are you ready to get some help because you're messed up? It needs to be, are you ready to get some help with me together? Okay, you're not, then I'm going to work on myself. You need to know I'm going to work on myself, and I don't know where that's going. I hope that it resolves this problem by me unhooking whatever it is that's triggering this for you, because I really want to be there for you. That's kind of the space you want to be in. Very often, the space that we're in is driven by our own sadness, and it comes out more like this: "You're never there for me. Oh my God, I'm hurting. Can't you see that I'm hurting? I gave you a week. You get help or else." And then usually there's a threat. Or you get help or I'm going to go on my own and I'll figure it out on my own. And who knows where that's going to go. Right? So you want to be really careful how you deliver the enforcement on this, because you may be in a place of high sensitivity. And if you're having that level of hurt and sadness and maybe a little anger, come to the next episode of Rich in Relationship, because that's what it's all about: how to release that, how to let it go so it doesn't own you, you own it. Controlling behavior. Controlling behavior is where they're attempting to control your decisions and actions or relationships. It might be manipulation. You might be seeing something that looks like manipulation. That all comes under the heading of controlling behavior. You first need to make a decision that you're going to make your own decisions. And your decisions may honor the needs of the ecology of your family, even the person who's being controlling, but you're going to make it from a place of what you think is best, not because you are giving in to them just for the sake of giving in to them. You're going to make your own decisions, and you're not going to allow others to dictate how you live your life. That's what it's about. And the expression of this is, I feel disrespected when you do X, Y, and Z. It seems kind of controlling to me. It reminds me of when my dad used to try and get me to play soccer, even though I didn't want to play soccer. And he would do everything he could to get me to make me do it. I'm going to make my own choice about this. And I really hope that you can respect that. That's the expression of it. And the enforcement is to make your own decisions, the ones that you think are best for the family and for yourself, to stand firm in that decision. You may need to get some support with that, and to distance yourself from any attempts to control you, your actions, your relationships. All right, blaming and deflecting. We're almost at the end here. This is refusing to take responsibility and shifting the blame onto you. This is super common. It's like in America, in particular, we are all trained to do this at birth. Our culture is rife with it. Hint, hint, need to look at yourself too. The boundary that you're going to make, or the decision you're going to make, is I'm not going to take on the blame for everything, particularly the things that are not mine, right? If they continue, I'm going to pause the conversation. And the expression of this is it's very similar. I feel frustrated and hurt when it sounds to me like you think I'm responsible for everything, because my brother did that to me when I was a kid, and I can't stand it. And so if it continues, I'm just going to walk away when I feel like this dynamic is coming up, until I can reset and meet this with fresh ears and eyes. And I hope the same is true for you. Let's talk about this in an hour. And of course, enforcing it means ending the conversation when blame shifting occurs, and only resume when both of you are willing to take responsibility. It's super important when you're either expressing or enforcing the boundaries, that you're clear and direct. All right. That also, though, it means being clear about that it's your experience. It's not necessarily something they're doing, right? If you're expressing it as something they're doing, it's basically a form of blame. You can express it as something they're doing if you're clear that it's the experience you're having in relationship to that they're triggering that. These I statements are super important. Have them on the website if you want to go check them out, richinrelationship.com. They're free. And it's also really important to make sure that your partner understands that you're just not going to tolerate this situation anymore, whether the behavior that you perceive is actually happening or whether it's another behavior that's triggering this in you. What you want to make clear to them is that you refuse to be in this state anymore, the state that is being triggered in you. And so it becomes less about them and more about us. You want to be consistent. So if you don't enforce them consistently, if you do it once and then don't do it again, or twice and don't do it again, it loses effectiveness, not only for them, but for us. So when we enforce a boundary for ourselves and do it inconsistently, our unconscious mind starts to say, oh, you're not really serious about that. You like engaging in this negative, toxic behavior, this toxic part of your relationship, and it allows it to happen more and more. However, when we exercise our boundaries with regularity, the message we give ourselves is we really care about ourselves, we're really committed to change, and we're going to move forward in our lives, no longer permitting this in our space. Not at home, not anywhere else. Consistency, super important. And also, remaining calm and grounded is important. Now, I want you to get that setting a boundary is like developing any new habit. I often say, when you make a decision to get more fit, the first time you go to the gym, you make that decision, you're fired up, you go in gung-ho, and then you do it, and you're lifting weights or jump roping or doing Pilates or yoga or whatever it is, and it's hard, right? It's hard because you have never done it or you haven't done it in a while. And setting boundaries feels like that. The first time you do it, it's kind of, I don't really know about this, and so it might be clunky. You might make mistakes, and that's okay. Just like when you first start lifting weights, you do it all wrong. But just like lifting weights, you can get support with this. You can get help with it. Listen to more podcasts. Reach out for help from your mentors and peers. Get support with this. It's really important. Just like any new habit, you want to make sure that you reinforce it. And as you do it, you're going to get better and better and better. When you are setting boundaries and you have to walk away and they just don't get it, the behavior on the other side does not change, this is an important time to find a coach or a therapist or a spiritual leader who has understanding of this. If the dynamic that you're attempting to address is going on and on and on, it means something deeper needs to be addressed. One of the examples I gave is we need to go get help. All right. So just to summarize, I just want to remind you that all relationships have some level of toxicity. We're almost each and every one of us not ideal managers of our emotions. And it is important to learn how to set boundaries to reduce and eliminate toxicity. Thank you for listening. I hope this has resonated with you. I want you to feel free to share this on whatever social media you participate in so that other people can benefit from it. Thank you and have a wonderful tomorrow.